How do you overcome negative thinking that isn't even actually a thought that you can grasp onto? Stay tuned because I am diving into that today. This is The Art of Plenty. I'm so glad you're here. I absolutely love sharing my heart with you. I've always said to people when they ask me about the podcast that I'm doing, what's this experience like? I always say it's as though I finally get the opportunity to share all of the thoughts that for my entire life have just been running through my mind. I've always ran an internal script. And with The Art of Plenty, that internal script that I've heard my whole life actually gets to be vocalized. I'm so honored to be able to share my thoughts with you. And I'm so thankful that you have chosen to spend time with me and to spend time thinking about the things in your life that you could improve, that you could change, that you could shift so that you actually get to live the life that you know you were meant for. That just gives me goosebumps thinking about. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been coming and listening for a while and you haven't hit subscribe. It means so much to me, and it's just a small thing on your end. But I get it too. I have not really been a person that subscribes to podcasts, and I recently started doing it because now that I'm in this position where I'm on the other side, I know how much it means to people like me when the people that are supporting the program actually subscribe and not just listen. Okay, let's get into it. Let's get into what happens when your negative thinking isn't even thinking. Now, what am I even talking about? Because how can negative thinking not be thinking? Well, let me set the stage. If you've been here, you know I love Pilates. I love Pilates. Here is why. It makes me feel beautiful. It makes my limbs feel long. And it's incredibly difficult. And it doesn't matter how long I've practiced, it never gets easy. I always feel like there's an opportunity to challenge myself further, which I really appreciate. And the best part about it is afterwards, I feel graceful, I feel connected to myself, and I feel ready for the day, provided I'm doing it in the morning. Sometimes I do it before bed. So I've been practicing Pilates off and on for probably about 6 years. I started doing it after my last baby, and I fell in love with it right away. But there were a lot of things that I struggled to do because my last baby was a cesarean, and I had lost a lot of that connection and that connective tissue in my midsection, which is essential for Pilates. So there are still some moves that I just can't do, and I know I can do it. And I've been waiting for my body to heal, and I've been trying to activate things that haven't been activated. But there are parts of me that still struggle with doing the Pilates. Now, I was practicing pretty consistently for a while where I was doing it twice a week, and I was doing the advanced order. And then I had a bit of a hiatus from Pilates where stuff was going on and I just didn't get to doing it. And the place where I was doing Pilates was no longer offering it, which I live in a small town. There's not a lot of options for going to a Pilates class. So I thought, okay, I'll just do it at home, which I did a bit, but I'd been out of practice. So you know what happens in January. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to get back into doing the things that make us feel great. I'm talking to myself, of course. And Pilates is one of those things that comes up. Because I've done Pilates enough, I know I can get back into the practice. So I'm doing Pilates one day. And again, not where I used to be. And there's this one exercise, and I can't even remember what it was, but I couldn't do it the way that I had been able to do it before. So it's not one of those ones that I'm still working on. It's one of those ones that I had mastered. And I don't have a thought like, oh, you used to be good at this, or you're not very good at this anymore. There's no thought, but there's this sensation that comes over my body that is one of failure. there is this shoulder slump, this disappointment that I could do this before and I can't do it now. But there's no conscious thought of, I used to be able to do this. It's as though my entire body felt a negative thought, but I didn't actually think it, which was an unusual feeling for me because I'm telling you, if there's a negative thought in my mind, I know how to get to the bottom of it. I know what to do. I know how to rework it. But this flummoxed me. How in the world do you change negative thinking that is a visceral reaction? That is a physical response. So I started to think about this. I started to unpack it because this is the way I go about things, especially when it comes into personal development. When I get stuck like this, I just want to deep dive and I want to start thinking about it. And I love to mull things like this over. And I started to think about the opposite piece around, well, I started to think about power poses. You probably know what I'm talking about. You know, when they say like, pull your shoulders back and stand with your legs a little bit apart and open up to the world and do this before you need confidence or before you go into a job opportunity that you're going after. It's a power pose. It makes you kind of come into your own skin so that when you go out into the world, you are ready for it. And I know there is a lot of debate on the research related to power poses and whether or not even works. And I know that there are people that have even been shunned or canceled in the community at large because of their research or their comments about power poses. I know all of that. But the idea of a power pose is that if you hold your body in a certain way, it's going to influence how you feel and how you behave. Now that speaks to me. This idea that the way that we hold our body is going to have an impact on the way that we live our life. Now get this. This really surprised me. What the research suggests is that it's not actually the power poses that have the greatest impact on people's lives. It's actually the defeating poses that have the greatest impact on a person's life. And even compared to a neutral pose, that's not like chest out, big shoulders, expansive, open to the world, but just neutral. Even compared to a neutral stance, a constrictive, hopeless, helpless pose has way more negative impact on a person. That just really speaks to me about this idea that the way that we hold our bodies, the way that we move in this world impacts the way we feel and the way we behave. And so I'm mulling this over because when that happened in Pilates, I felt like I was sending myself a message of defeat, of resign, that my whole posture in my body felt the disappointment in myself. I'm telling you, I don't want to live in disappointment, especially doing something that I love, especially doing something that makes me feel beautiful. Because if I experience a lot of that sense of disappointment, guess what? I'm not going to want to do it anymore. It's going to rob me of my joy of Pilates. When I think about power poses, when I think about the way that we hold ourselves, I think about the confidence that it inspires, not just to ourselves, but also to the people around us. We have family friends, and we were eating dinner with them a while ago, and their kids are older than my kids. And consequently, my boys look up to their boys, and their boys are older, so they're men. They're grown. They have their height. Now, the older brother is the smaller of the two brothers. He is extremely confident, and he stands and has a posture of someone who has a lot of confidence. He has a very expansive way and an expansive presence. And this is just how he is. He's been like this forever. Now, the second brother, who is younger, is physically larger than the first brother. He's probably got 3 inches on him in height. and his shoulder width is bigger. They're built completely different, and he is just a bigger guy. There's no way around it. But the way his posture is he turns in a little bit more. He's a little bit more stooped. He kind of is not as expansive. He's more constrictive in his posturing. So I was having a conversation after we had dinner with this family, and I said to my son, who really looks up to both of these guys because they're wonderful young men, and I said, did you notice this? The younger brother is the bigger of the brothers, but in your mind, who seems bigger? And it's the older brother that seems bigger to him. And I said, because I was teaching him about how we are sending messages all the time to the people around us by the way we hold ourselves. And what are the messages that we want to convey? What are the things that we want people to remember about us, that we want people to take away from interactions with us? So I was talking to him about pulling your shoulders back. And for a long time, I used to tell this son when we would sit together at the piano bench, which he abhors piano, I would say, pull your shoulders back. And I'd call him a little lobster because apparently, and I don't really know much about this, but I had remembered reading an article about lobsters and how they interact. And I mean, a lot of species do this, but lobsters will puff up, make themselves bigger, and other lobsters will not fight them because of their posture. So they don't have to fight as much because they look like they're tough. They don't have to defend whatever it is lobsters to defend. I'm probably butchering the science behind lobster behavior. Sorry for those who study crustaceans. But I call my son a lobster for a very long time because I wanted him to showcase confidence, and that there's something about that when you're interacting with others, that the way that you hold yourself. So this was just another opportunity to talk to him about confidence and the way that we hold our body, because I know it makes a difference in our interactions for how we're feeling. Now, that's something separate than power posing. I'm talking about the way that you actually hold yourself, whether or not you're pretending like in a power pose, or you actually are that way. So in the research, if it's the constrictive that have more impact, what is happening to me? What is the message that I'm sending to myself that when I was doing Pilates, that sensation came over me of disappointment and my whole body responded to it? Is there something to that? Is there a negative aspect that is impacting me by having this sense of disappointment in myself? Because I don't want that. I do not want to have something like that sneak up on me even. And I know that we can use negative emotions for motivation to create change. And that when we're disappointed, we can harness that disappointment to fuel us to avoid that type of disappointment in the future. But this feels incredibly different to me because it completely caught me off guard. And I felt like I had no control over it. I just want to sideline for a second because I've been creating podcasts now for over a year, which is mind-boggling to me. And I just want to thank my audience for coming out and supporting me and tuning in, and for those texts that you send to let me know that you heard a message and it spoke to you and it bears witness to your soul. Those little comments and those DMs mean the world to me. I feel so encouraged by it that your life is being changed, that you have found something from my talks that you can apply to your life. I so appreciate it. If there is ever something that's speaking to you, I encourage you to share it with your friends, because when you do that, it solidifies the learning for you. And it also helps me because my show gets out there to more people. So the part of this piece, this physical disappointment that I could feel in my body that really bothered me, was that it was out of my control and that I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to shape it. So this is the part that I have been mulling over in my mind. I have been grinding it and working it through and thinking about it and coming back to it and trying to notice, how often does this happen to me? When does this happen to me? And I came up with really nothing about how to change it. So what did I do? I went to my mother. I have a great relationship with my mom, and she has a lot of wisdom because she's been walking around on this planet for over 70 years. That is a lot of wisdom. And of course, it was so obvious to her, which I suppose that's one of the joys of being 70, is that you have a lifetime of experience and knowledge that some things you don't have to mull over anymore. And this is what she said. Well, it's just what's in your heart. So that response that bubbled up was a showcase of how I feel in my heart. You know, she's not wrong. In fact, she's 100% right. Even though I really love Pilates and love pretty much everything about Pilates, there have been a few movements that I haven't been able to master. And I've tried all sorts of things. And I feel disappointed that I haven't been able to do some of the moves. And they're the simple ones. It's not like they're the most difficult move in the advanced order. It's stuff that's in the very basic beginning Pilates class that I struggle with and haven't been able to do. And it's as though there's no reason that my body couldn't be able to do that. Like when I first started doing Pilates, I knew that I still was healing a lot of my core from my cesarean and from having 5 pregnancies. But it didn't make sense that I couldn't do these moves. So because I love it so much, that disappointment was greater. And that disappointment is in my heart. So in situations, even though it wasn't that move specifically that caused me to feel that way, it's what came up. When I'm unguarded, that's what arose. That's what bubbled up. What's in your heart is going to show up. So now what? What do I do with that? What do I do with the things in my heart that I don't necessarily want to bubble up? What do I do with those things in my heart that are causing me grief, that are causing me disappointment, that I feel like I just don't have any control over? What do I do with that? Do you remember a couple weeks ago, I did an episode about finding your anchor? That when things are rough, you got to pull together and you find that anchor that propels you or keeps you steady in times of storms. Well, I will link that episode in the show notes. But those components of the anchor, those meditations, those things that we put into ourselves, that's the same practice as what I probably need to do with Pilates. When you put that practice into play, you're changing your heart. Because ideally, in a situation, I want specific things to bubble out of my heart. And in order to have certain things bubble out, I have to be intentional of what I'm putting into my heart. Because whatever I sow into my heart, that's what it's going to grow. So all those years when I've been annoyed with myself for not being able to do certain moves in Pilates, when I've been disappointed about the way my body's been working, guess what I've been doing? I've been sowing disappointment into my heart. And yeah, in my brain, I may have said to myself, it's okay, you're going to get it. But there were just as many messages that went deeper into my heart that were feeling disappointment, that were feeling let down. Whatever you plant is what will grow. So the work becomes, what do you want to bubble out of your heart? What do you actually want to grow? Those are the things you have to plant and then water. Because when your mind is out of the picture, that's what's going to come up. That's what's going to bubble out of your heart. So I got some work to do. I have some work to do. I have to change what's growing in my heart. So this is what I'm going to practice. I'm going to work on nurturing different parts of myself and nurture affection for the way that my body works, so that in situations where I can't do things that I want to be doing, what will bubble up won't be disappointment. Maybe what will bubble up will be hope. Like, oh, I can do it. I'm getting closer. That was closer than before. Because that could also have bubbled up. It didn't have to be disappointment. It could have been, whoa, that was so much better than last time. Or, wow, you're coming back. You're getting stronger again. Who knows, right? Who knows what would have bubbled up had I sown something different, had I sown in love for myself, compassion, grace, mercy, all of those wonderful things that we need to practice, not just for ourselves, but for others. So that is the work, that is the challenge that I'm giving to myself today is, what am I going to sow into my heart so that I can create change? Because this is very different work than changing thoughts. It has to be, because it's on a different level. It's on that level that it's not quite tangible. You can't quite touch it. The thought isn't as clear. It's not as laid out. It's not as linear or straightforward. So it's going to take a different strategy in order to change. And then it's waiting to see what bubbles up. Because what comes out of your mouth is what's in your heart. So I want to put things in my heart, but it's not just out of your mouth, it's out of your body. So I'm going to start changing the landscape of my heart to see what gets released in the future. Because I know this is going to be one of those practices that takes time, as good things often do. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the art of plenty. I'm glad you're here. Have a beautiful day.